Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, what we'll go over today is a little bit about what are performance analyses or needs assessments. We use that both terms in this course. When to use these and how to use them, and then finally, we'll talk about your signature assignment for this course. Okay. Basically, what I'm referring to when I use the term performance analyses or performance analysis or needs assessment is a gap analysis followed by a cause analysis. And different people call this different things, and that's why we have a couple terms here. At the strategic level, the Coast Guard called this a strategic needs assessment. So it's similar to a needs assessment, but done at the strategic level. So you're looking at multiple gaps and multiple causes for those gaps. So at what I've done is in my own mind, what makes sense is performance analysis is a term that is used a lot by Roger Chevalier, and I use a lot of his materials in this course. Roger just passed away this past year. He was a mentor to me, and when I first taught this course, he actually helped me teach the first version of it. So rest in peace, Roger, and we'll continue to still use your material, and hopefully your name will live on in your book and also in this course. So at the so Roger uses performance analysis. I use both the term performance analysis and needs assessment, and I do that for a couple different reasons. One is that Humboldt State uses the term needs assessment, and so they recognize that term. Roger uses performance analysis, so all the material is written with performance analysis. So we use that term interchangeably. The process is the same. The process is always a gap analysis followed by cause analysis. Now there are some other things involved, but those are the big two things that we'll be doing. Okay, so I mentioned Roger is going to be a big part of this course. He has videos. He was a regular presenter at the International Society for Performance Improvement, also known as ISPI. And he did workshops on this there. And he has written papers on this, and he has also written the book that we use for this course. Not all of the chapters of the book are going to be relevant to this particular section of the course, but the book itself is a solid book for supervisors and managers when you want to use data to drive your leadership style and management style. So at its core, performance analyses are systematic processes. And they're also systemic. So we take the global perspective, we try to bring everything into account, and then we follow a process to come up with an outcome. And we do that so that we can replicate and come up with the same outcome, whether you use a different an analyst or you should come up with the same outcome. It's ideally suited to help align the operational level, which would be the level at which most of the work gets done in an organization, with the tactical level, which is middle management. Typically, how do you operationalize strategic goals, and finally strategic goals. So those three levels. The performance analysis is ideally suited for basically aligning those three together if you do it properly. Hence the reason at the beginning I talked about if you put the word strategic in front of needs assessment, you can call this a strategic needs assessment, because you are taking the strategic into account but focusing on the actual work, the operational level. So the approach looks like this. As I mentioned, the big items are the gap analysis and the cause analysis, and those are the first two boxes here in this flow chart. In addition to the gap analysis, Roger has added a force field analysis to his material, and it's pretty neat. We'll be doing that. And then after you figure out what the causes are, then you're look into the intervention selection and design and development phase, and that is exactly what it sounds like. That's where you're finding, what are the solutions to the problem, and finally implementation, and then further you're going to evaluate what you implement, and hopefully make changes, and then go ahead and incorporate those changes. So the gap analysis, as I mentioned, there's a couple more nuanced things about it, and one way to present those is in this diagram here. The gap is exactly what it sounds like. It's the difference between the current or present performance level and the desired or the optimal performance level. So it's that space between the lines there. What Roger and others have realized is that sometimes that gap is too large. It's too big to just to make a giant leap to where you want to get to. So you chunk this down into different phases. And for the first phase, you would look for a reasonable goal. And that's what this dotted line represents here. Now, another thing Roger brings up in his material is the need for a trend analysis. Not everybody that uses this, gap and cause analysis, whether they call it a performance analysis or a needs assessment, not everybody that uses this these analyses do a trend analysis, but it's very important because, as we know from looking at the Head First data analysis book, you can't say that an intervention made a change unless you know, unless you're measuring before that change, right? So, and even still, unless you can control for the other variables that could be influencing that performance, then you still really can't attribute it as a cause and effect change. So the trend analysis helps us get a little more confidence that our intervention that we pick, that we select, or interventions, plural, that they are effective. And so by doing a little bit of data collection of the problem or opportunity before the point of intervention, allows us to get the data on the trend. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it steady? Does it change from at certain times a year with the seasons and things like this? So when we get to the cause analysis phase, what we're really talking about is root causes. So this is a very important part of the analysis process, the performance analysis process. If you address something that is not a root cause, then you're not going to have a systemic solution, right? It's going to be surface level, or it's going to be incomplete. So we're really focused on the root causes. What is actually causing the behavior that we want to correct in this case? Roger and others who use this analysis process borrow from a guy named Thomas Gilbert, who developed this model called the behavior engineering model. Roger updated it with some more modern language, but it's essentially the same as Thomas Gilbert presented back in, I want to say, the 70s. It's a powerful model. It's been used by people all the way up until the last couple of years. So it's not something that's outdated in any means. It's something that has been presented in different ways. It might not always look the same, but what I have found, and I think Roger would have agreed, is that the way Gilbert presented this in these 6 boxes makes a lot of sense. On the horizontal, we have environment and individual, and really that is the performer. You can think of the individual as the performer. So whoever's doing the performance that you found the gap in, that's that individual. And then environment is just that. It's everything external to that performer. And then it should make sense here what those boxes are. So for the environment, for information, that's information that exists outside of the performer. It could be in manuals. It can be in guides. It could also be in some sort of performance management system that the employees follow. But it's there so that they can refer to it outside of themselves. And then the flip side is skills and knowledge that is just known by the employees. So this is typically when we think of training, this is what we would give employees is skills and knowledge. Then for resources, the flip side is capacity. So that one's a little bit more, I would say, not as clear as the information and skills and knowledge one. It's resources are tools. It could be the right ladder for a painter that's a house painter. If he or she is constantly using a 6-foot ladder to paint a 15-foot building, it's probably not the most optimal tool for the job, right? So get them a longer ladder and you make the problem start to disappear, right? Capacity is more along the lines of your capacity for learning, the individual's capacity for learning. Is there something within the individual that they're just not capable of that particular job? And I'll give you an example. In the Coast Guard, we had operational specialists, which were the folks that monitor the radios. They do monitor the radar screens on ships. They're the ones on shore that would receive a mayday call for a man overboard or some other marine accident. And we used to train those folks or they still train them at Petaluma here, where I worked. And I was the training officer there, so I oversaw all the disenrollments from the different schools. This one individual, young man, was disenrolled from the OS school, the Operational Specialist School, because he just couldn't get past a certain module in the training session. And so he came to me, and it was in a conference room with all his instructors, the managers of the school, my deputy training officer, myself, and we listened to the case. And at the end of the day, a lot of times there's some fault that we can find in the individual. They're not studying hard enough. They're going out too much at night. They're not spending the time to learn the material. This individual, however, was staying after school to work on problems, was not going out on the weekends. This person was doing everything correct, and he begged us to give him a second shot. And my role in this meeting is I was the person to decide whether he gets another shot or not. And I gave him another shot. I said, this individual is motivated. He has all the motivation in the right areas. He really wants to be part of the Coast Guard. Let's give him another shot. Let's see how he does. So we held him back, put him in the next class, and he got to that same point in the course, and he came up against the same obstacles. He just couldn't grasp the ideas, the concepts, and he couldn't. The main thing was he couldn't perform the job as it was being trained to him. He came up before us again, and at this time it was an easy decision. It was okay. It's time to think about a different career path for you. And so we kind of pushed him towards the different career path. And that might seem harsh, but at the end of the day, if you were on a sailboat and you had an emergency at sea, if this person couldn't perform the job, you would not want this person on the radio. So the person did not have the capacity for that job as we were training it. And in the Coast Guard, we train in a performance manner, so everything's very much real world training. So it wasn't he couldn't pass a multiple choice test. He couldn't do the functions of a radio person or an operational specialist to save someone's life if he needed to do it. So that's capacity. And then finally, incentives and motives. And this gets into the scenario I just presented. Did that person have the motives? Absolutely. They had the motives. Did they have the skills and knowledge? Maybe not. Did they have the capacity? No, they didn't have the capacity. On the flip side of motives is incentives. If you look at incentives are just what they sound like. It could be monetary incentives. It could be intrinsic motivation. Actually, that would be under the motives. Intrinsic is within the individual, but it could be some sort of extrinsic motivator. There's a lot of ways you can motivate employees nowadays. It's not just with money. A lot of times, time off is a big motivator. One of the biggest motivators is choice. If you give people choice in their work environment, then they're going to be more motivated to complete that work. So those are the 6 boxes that, and you can kind of see, it's all very interesting stuff, and you might pick something in your mind and just try to say, okay, what would that be? And try to figure out which box it would go in. There's been studies after studies on the 6 boxes, and time again, they've found that 85% of the problems reside in the environment. So that one individual that I was talking about with the capacity problem, he would be part of the minority, right? The 15%. Most of the times in workplace situations, we can solve our problems just by addressing the environment. Do we have the right guides, manuals? Do we have the right tools, the best tools to get the optimal performance we want? Are the incentives right? Are we disincentivizing the work that we want to see? We have to ask those kind of questions to get at this 85%. The good thing about this is that right now, most of the money is spent down here in the knowledge box on training. If you have any, if you listen to the news, if you've been around a while and been listening to your employer talk, and if they're typical, most of the time when they have a problem, they talk about, well, we just need training. We need more training. and they're talking about this box, which is just a slice of 15%. So they're likely wrong when it comes to what the right solution is for the problem. And so this is the reason we do these analyses, is because we want to educate our employers and decision makers to what a more effective solution would be. And oftentimes it's more cost effective because, as I said before, training is very expensive. So if you're focusing on just part of the problem, and it's going to be an expensive solution, you could be passing up a lot of other possible solutions to your problem that don't cost as much to implement. When we get into the cause analysis phase, Thomas Gilbert developed a bunch of probing questions, and sometimes these are open-ended questions to kind of help us figure out what the cause is, and sometimes they're more directive and more specific. So you can see here for information, here's an example of a question. Now, I will say, I didn't say this yet, but you want questions for all 6 boxes to make sure that your solution is systemic. You've covered all the possible areas for a performance or problem. So you start with information. You have questions for resources, incentives, knowledge and skills, capacity, and motives. So this is one for information. The open-ended question would be, how are performance expectations communicated to employees? Very fundamental, do employees know what they're supposed to be doing? What are the expectations? How are they communicated? And then the direct questions, the follow-up questions are here. Okay, so here's one for resources and so on and so forth. So when you're talking about doing a survey or doing interviews or doing a focus group, your questions are already pretty much developed for you here if you use the performance analysis process. Incentives, motives, capacity, skills, and knowledge. Okay, so once you go through the process of collecting your data for your cause analysis with these probing questions, by the way, this is the majority of the time that you'll spend on this analysis is in the cause analysis phase. Then you have a good idea of where your performance gap is and also what a potential reasonable goal is. Now, what we drew here on top of the chart that we saw before is from what we would call the force analysis, which is something that Roger Chevalier added to this process. And it makes a lot of sense. So once we ask these questions about, and we find out where the problems are, then you have to start doing some assessment as an analyst as to how much are those forces driving this performance problem. Not everything is going to drive it the same amount. So the way Roger draws this is either these arrows, the longer they are, the greater the force. So they can either be pushing the problem away from where you want to be, or they can be pushing the problem towards the optimal or to the goal so whatever data you find out there, it might be good. In other words, it might be these green forces, or it might be red. You would draw it into your cause analysis. And there's worksheets for this. You'll see it. The difference is this is flipped. Right now, this is horizontal. It's flipped just for the purpose of presenting it on an 8.5 and 11 by sheet of paper. It's flipped vertically, so you'll just see it turned. here's what it looks like. The dots, I think something got messed up on the slide here, but the dots should be equal on both sides, because they're just right now those are just to help you draw the line, so that they don't mean anything. They're just there. But that like the first 3 lines should be shifted over 1 to the right, to be aligned with the stock here. And then you see we basically paraphrase and just kind of take out a summarize what questions or what area of the of information we were asking about. Clear expectations. That's from that first question that we asked about expectations. It could be more than one question. It doesn't have to be just one, but you at least want to have a few questions for each box: information, resources, incentive. And that'll change a little bit based on what you're looking at, whatever problem or opportunity you're looking at. And the reason I use opportunity is sometimes we don't want to look at this in terms of a negative perspective. We want to say, okay, well, our level is here in terms of our performance, but we want to be up here. So it's more of an opportunity instead of a problem. So here's what it looks like when you have it filled out. Now these boxes are there is some on the worksheets there is some verbiage, but then over here you would fill out your own. So it might say financial and non-financial incentives are present. So this would be all filled out, but then over here you would write in what you found, factors affecting performance. And then you would draw in your arrow for that section. And it could be 2 arrows. It could be an arrow. You might have some forces working for you, some forces working against. But what you want to get at it eventually is you want to distinguish whether it's a positive or negative net force on the problem or opportunity. And then finally, once you have your data on your cause analysis, you want to go to your intervention selection phase. And this is where there's a little more art involved in selecting your interventions. You want to make sure that you pick interventions that have the biggest bang for the buck, that there's residual effects on maybe other gaps. So you might find, say, 5 things that are really affecting performance. If you have one solution might affect 3 of those things. So that's what I mean by residual effect. And then you want to also think about cost of implementation. You might do a little cost benefits analysis on a couple different solutions or solution systems, so that it's multiple items, multiple interventions in one solution. This is just something that Roger has came up with and had in one of his sources. I think the interesting thing about this diagram is that you'll see that the environmental factors are further out on the lever, so they're going to have a greater influence on performance results, right? And that's based on the 85-15, the 6 boxes and the breakdown of individual versus environmental factors. We know that 85% of the time, or 85% of the solutions should be in that environmental factors area. So this kind of tells you the same thing in a different way. Maybe that 85% of the weight in this case is going to be on environmental factors to get a solution to lift up that performance. Okay, so that's the process that you're going to follow. You're going to pick an area of performance. It could be at the organizational level. It could be at the individual level. It doesn't have to be workplace related. I've had people in the past that have said, well, I'm really not in a position at work to do this. And can I focus on my family or myself or my my hobbies? And that's all fair game. I've had people do a performance analysis on a fitness goal that they had. You can see where this would work. What is the gap? Where is the desired performance? Where is the current performance? And then what are the causes? Why aren't you getting there? Is it a capacity issue? Are you old like myself and you're just not going to get there and probably not going to play in the World Cup, and you just have to come to terms with that? Or is it a little different? Is it a motive issue? Is it skills and knowledge? You just don't have what you need to perform, but if you had it, you would be doing well. And don't forget about the environmental aspects as well when you're doing those on yourself. I've had people do it on chores at the home level. Typically, when I've seen those, it's been multiple people, two adults and a couple children or teenagers. It's been a teenager and an adult in one case, whatever it was, but the household had a goal at one level. They weren't meeting their goals in terms of chores, in terms of what they wanted. And so they looked at, they used the performance analysis process to look at it. But we've also had interesting work examples too, where people have gone in and they've, it might have been something where they felt they weren't, they could improve in a certain area of a function of the office. It might have been a filing function in terms of having information filed in the most optimal way for their performance, so that they had access to the files when they needed those files. And I've seen other ones where it's been on a process, a hiring process that took too long. So they were looking for, how to shorten that process. Why was it taking so long, and so on and so forth. The guidelines for this one are going to be, pick something that you can actually do in a few weeks, because it's not, this is something that people and organizations spend several weeks, if not months, doing one of these analyses on a particular job. If you worked for a refuge trash company and you found that you were losing trash cans at a higher rate than your competitors, or what you thought you should be losing those trash cans, you might look at that problem. But that means you're going to have to really find out what's going on. You're going to have to talk to the folks that are picking up those trash cans and dumping them, and find out what their drivers are. And you're going to have to look at the environmental aspects, and it can take a long time to get through there. So for this course, what I'd like you to do is pick something that's a little more close to home. In your office, it could be as simple as the making coffee the correct way and having a clean coffee area at your workplace. That would be kind of along the lines of the chores at home. Fitness goals work well, as I mentioned before. It could also be some sort of other individual goal. say personal planning. I've seen finance used before, personal finance goals. Whatever you feel comfortable with of kind of writing a report based on that area of your life, and also that is doable within the next 3 weeks. Just take a look at what a performance report looks like after you do the analysis. Now, I want to pause here and just say the majority of your time should be spent on the analysis. Yes, it's going to take you a little while to write a report, but you can't write a good report without doing a good analysis. So you got to make sure that you find out what you want to focus on, and find out how you're going to address the gap and cause analysis, get your data before you write your report. So once you have the analysis done, you're going to write this report. This is just some information about the actual report. It is your signature assignment for this course. It's going to have an executive summary. It should. These are once again examples, suggestions. Typically, this is a report that would be seen in a workplace, not necessarily an academic classroom. So the difference is a lot of people in the past have put in like an abstract, which you normally see in an academic paper that you're submitting to a journal for publication or something. In a workplace situation, what you're more interested in is an executive summary, something that a decision maker can pick up, they can read it, and they can know, is this something they're interested in reading further about? Is it something that is going to help them? So I suggest an executive summary with these items, and then project overview, methodology. That's where you're going to just talk about this process. Tell me about what you know about the analysis process. Well, it's gap analysis, cause analysis. These are the you can use the worksheets as a means to talk about these areas, but you should really talk about it in terms of a little blurb or two in your paper, talking about and use references, Roger Chevalier or anybody else that you're referencing, and then how you collected your data. So you'll have a data collection, a little blurb about that. And finally, recommendations, findings and recommendations. So that's the most important, as we've mentioned this course before, I think in the Head First Data Analysis book. It's very important to make those recommendations based on your data. Your data is your report and those findings. So make sure you make some good recommendations. And that is it, I think. So, nope. Some areas to focus on. This is just something to come back to and look at. And that is it. Any questions? And like I said, we'll have a time for questions now and then after I stop recording.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you want to submit the outline to you like it was just on the PowerPoint for the idea? It said something about submitting our ideas to you in an email.
In the email, it doesn't have to be an outline form. It can just be the idea. Okay. And it could be an email. It can be a conversation. If you want to have a conversation, any way you want to talk about your idea for the analysis.
Okay, great.
I don't think there's an assignment for an outline in this this course. I don't think.
Okay, I just wanted to know if that was something that we had to do or if it was just an option or anything like that. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Is the analysis presentation, the elevator speech, relevant to this assignment?
It is. That's a good point. So that is kind of my safeguard to make sure that you actually have an idea that's been well thought through and that you've gotten some input on. Now, in the past, what I've seen is that typically, it serves two purposes. One, make sure that, I see it. So, it gives me another opportunity to look at your idea before you go forward. That's probably the most important. And then the second one is just to get your classmates' input on what you're doing. And people have different strengths, as you know, and they might be able to identify something that I didn't identify that is helpful to you in doing this process. So that is a good point. And that's due when? Do you have a date on that, Annabelle?
I'm showing it as July 1st.
July 1st? Okay, that sounds right. So a couple weeks, a little less. Any other questions before we stop recording? All right, I'm going to stop recording, then I'll hang on for a little bit longer.
Okay.